Okay, grade 9s. This should be lesson 9 of our biology unit. It should also be the last lesson of this unit. So right now we should be looking at or probably finishing up this lesson. Now, I haven't decided how we're going to conclude the unit. I may do a short online, not quite test, but not quite quiz. That's cumulative for the unit, so maybe like a quest through the LMS. That'll likely be a little bit easier than the test we would have done in class, but a little longer and a little more difficult than the quizzes that we've done in this unit up till now. But again, it'll be the same rules. You have unlimited attempts to do it. Leave it open for a week. You have unlimited time, and so I really just want you to have your books open in front of you, take your time, and get through it and get the best mark possible under the circumstances. The other thing that I was kind of toying with, and as of this recording, I haven't decided whether we're going to do it or not, so you're going to have to check your announcements on the LMS page, but I was considering doing a research project, kind of similar to the brochure assignment that we did in chemistry, although maybe just kind of scale it back and make it a little bit easier, just to kind of to give you guys something that you can look up on your own and sort of have it be geared towards something that's a Canadian issue in particular. So that may or may not come to pass. It may or may not have already come to pass, and you may already be aware of that. Just I haven't decided at this time, at the time of recording, whether we're going to do that or not. But just bear that in mind, that those are possibilities, and that you're double checking our announcements to make sure that you know what's going on. The other thing that I want to do here is I really want to highlight for this particular lesson the pages in the textbook and the questions, because I'm going to go through this lesson quick, and I think there's a little more detail in the textbook that you might get. So please make sure that you're checking those pages in the textbook and that you're doing those questions, just so you understand this topic as best as possible, because I'm going to kind of go through it quicker, okay, and just kind of get an overview of it, and a little more detail is going to come out of the textbook, okay? So first thing is we're going to talk about something called environmental stewardship. And what environmental stewardship is it's something that as Catholics, it's certainly our responsibility, but I happen to, and I think there are a lot of people that agree with me, that it's not just a unique Catholic responsibility. I think it's a responsibility for all of us as citizens of the planet, and that responsibility is for the welfare of our environment, of our planet. We all live here. It's one planet. None of us is getting off this planet. And so I think the onus is on us to treat our environment, our planet, our home, with as much respect as possible. Okay, and there's some evidence of that. There's some reference to that in the Catholic Bible, and but I don't think you need to be Catholic to understand that responsibility. I think that should be something that, Catholic or not, a faithful person or not a faithful person, I don't think it matters. I think that we all need to be taking responsibility for the planet on which we live. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we do that, and let's talk about it from a science perspective. Okay, so we know what environmental stewardship is. That means we're assuming responsibility. Now, assuming means we are accepting responsibility for the welfare of our environment. Okay, that means each and every one of us understands that there are things we have to do to care for our environment. Okay, now, why do we do it? We look after the biosphere for other humans that are currently alive, for future generations, because my kids and your kids and our grandkids and our grandkids' grandkids and so on and so forth, they'd like to live on this planet too. And I think that you may not have realized this, but as I sort of get older, it's important for me to understand that the world that I leave behind to my kids should provide them with the same quality of life that I had, if not better. And what I definitely don't want to do is I definitely don't want to leave a worse quality of life for my kids and grandkids and future generations. That's definitely what I don't want to do. I want life to be better for my children and my children's children and so on and so forth. Okay. And the third thing here is not just people, but for other organisms that are responsible for holding this ecosystem together. Okay. Now, as scientists learn more and more about the effects of human impact on ecosystems, then we give more attention to decreasing our impact. Okay. and restoring the stuff that we've already messed up. So I mentioned in a previous lesson, I said that, that historically speaking, even prehistorically speaking, we have had an unprecedented impact on the environments that we live on. We drastically change all the environments that we live within. And it's only relatively recently that we've realized that we caused these changes. Okay. And so it's only relatively recently that we started to say, hey, maybe we should start fixing the stuff we've messed up. And that's what we would call restoration ecology. Okay. And that means we're taking ecosystems that we've destroyed or degraded, and we're going to intervene to renew those ecosystems, to improve them, to return them to what they would naturally be. And there are several methods for that. Okay. First is called reforestation. Okay. And that means we're trying to regrow a forest. Now, that could mean naturally, or that could mean that we actually plant trees ourselves. Okay. Where we've clear cut. Okay. Now, it takes many, many years to happen. But if we get the ball rolling, in other words, if we spark that process, then natural succession kind of takes way, and we can see the return of native species and biodiversity. Okay, so we see a couple diagrams here. We see a forest that was clear cut. The land was used for agriculture. Okay, then in diagram B, we see that red trees were replanted. Okay, and you know that it's human replanting, because all the trees in that B, they're planted in rows. Okay, so you can see how the trees are planted in rows. So obviously nature does not grow things in perfect rows. We do. Okay. And I don't want to get into an argument about the difference between rows and columns here. Okay, it's not important right now. You know what I mean when I say rows. Okay, this isn't like the periodic table where just go with the flow. Okay, it's rows, and you know who I'm talking to. Okay, as red pines grew, they provided shade under which other species grew. So we planted these trees, and then the trees start to provide things themselves that other organisms can take advantage of to survive. Okay, and after many years, natural succession occurred, and there was a gradual return of native species. Now, here's something that's interesting. We used to say, conserve paper, don't use wood, don't use too much paper. These things, when we overuse them, it's bad for the environment because it takes a long time for trees to regrow. As it turns out, it does not take that long for lumber, for trees to regrow. It's far less impactful for us to cut down and replant trees than it is to use petroleum oil to make plastic, or it is to mine iron out of the ground to make steel. And so wood actually ends up being a wonderful building and supply and resource for us to use, because we can replenish that in only a few years. Okay, so it actually turns out wood is a very good resource for us, because we can manage that succession. We can manage replanting those trees, unlike mining iron for steel or mining petroleum oil to produce plastics, because the process of mining those things destroys environments in greater ways than cutting trees down does, and it's also enormously difficult to recreate those resources once we've used them, and then to repair the ecosystems after. Okay, restoration method 2, wetland restoration. So again, if you look at the previous lesson, we talked about, here's all the bad stuff we're doing. We're cutting down trees, we're ruining wetlands. Here's the stuff that we're doing to fix those mistakes. Okay, now we have a lot of organizations and government agencies in Canada that are working to restore wetlands by returning the water that was drained back to its natural level. Okay, and what we're doing is we're trying to keep track of the soil quality, the composition, the water coverage, the plant life, and the habitat. Each of those things in the list that's in the blank on this note, those are data points that scientists keep track of. Okay, and they have historical records, and what they do is they try to do things, they tweak the area until they can get those things, those data points, back to what they were pre-destruction. Okay, so There's an example here, the Ministry of Natural Resources in Norfolk County, which is really close to us. That's kind of where Port Dover is, if you've ever been to Port Dover, or maybe you haven't been yet, but I'm sure you will. Probably before you graduate high school, you'll have visited Port Dover with your family or with your friends. Okay, they began the Wetlands Drainage Restoration Project, and you can see a picture there, and hopefully what that's going to do is it's going to return the wetlands in that area around Port Dover in Norfolk County back to their sufficient levels, their natural levels. Okay. And you can see in that picture that's there, there's something kind of built that looks like a little device that's built, a little structure that's built. And the idea behind that is to pump water in and return it to the natural level. Okay. And we're big on this in Canada, less so in the United States right now because of the person who is currently in charge of the United States. But in Canada, we're pretty good with this type of thing. Okay. Okay, restoration method 3, we want to control alien species. Alien species throw off the balance of an ecosystem. Okay, so we use biocontrols and chemicals to control alien species. What's a biocontrol? We get another species that enters in to control the population of an undesirable species. So one example is the European gypsy moth. Okay, they eat tree leaves and they can actually clear a tree of all its leaves. And if the tree doesn't have leaves, it can't perform photosynthesis and it dies. Okay, so what we did was we brought a fly in from Europe called a parasitoid, and it was introduced as a form of biocontrol. What the parasitoid does is it lays its eggs inside the gypsy moth caterpillar and kills it before it becomes a moth. Okay, so it kills the caterpillar before it becomes a moth, and then, at least as far as we can tell, without the gypsy moth caterpillars, okay, the parasitoid, this European fly, can't survive. So the idea is that we use this parasitoid to get rid of the gypsy moths, and then once the gypsy moths are all gone, well, the fly will die out following, and will have little impact on the environment. Okay. Now, sometimes we use chemicals to control alien species. Okay. And their example here is going to be Norway rats and black rats in Lingara Island in British Columbia. And this island is home to nesting bird species. Okay. And it's a great place for them because there's no predators in that environment. So it's a great place to, let's see, raise our kids. Okay. There's no natural predators to eat the eggs or to eat the young birds. Okay. Now, accidentally, a couple of species of rats entered into this island on a ship without anyone noticing, and they began to eat birds' eggs. Okay. And if you eat the eggs, well, then what happens to the population? It drops. Okay. And then what we've done now is we've taken bait that contains poison and we've placed it around the island. And what the rats do is they take the bait, they eat the food that has poison in it, and they die. Okay, so we're using the rat poison to essentially kill all the rats. The birds aren't going to eat the same food the rats do, so the birds are untouched by this particular rat poison, but the population of rats drastically decreases, and then the population of these nesting birds rebounds back to its pre-rat levels. Now, are there downfalls to using chemicals to control alien species? Yes, there are. Okay. Now, chemicals are not just unique to killing rats. These chemicals, rat poison will typically kill people if they consume it, or at least make people very, very sick. And so one of the dangers is, what if something other than the rat eats the poison? And that could be a big, big problem. Now, this island is a great place for them to use a chemical control like the rat poison, because an island is contained. And they sort of know what species live on that island, and they probably know that it's unlikely that another species is going to consume this poison. What would be the problem with using this on the mainland or in southern Ontario here? Well, the problem is there's such a diversity of life here on the mainland or in southern Ontario, is that you can't be sure that it's just the rat eating the poison. Okay, it's possible that another unintended species could consume that poison and cause decreases in unintended populations. Okay, so that's sort of the considerations. It's not just a cure-all. You can't just put this poison out and get rid of the rats that way, because you don't know what effect it might have on other species. An island is a great place to do this because you could potentially grasp what kind of impacts you're having. Hey, on this island, it's only birds and these rats. The birds aren't going to eat the poison, only the rats will, so we're good. But you can't be sure of that in larger areas, larger mainland areas. Okay. Okay. On this page, we have we've got two pieces of information here. Our fourth restoration method is called bioremediation. And that means we're taking living organisms and we use the living organisms to clean up contaminated areas naturally. Okay. Plants and fungi are grown at toxic sites, not only to add more plants, but what they tend to do is they tend to filter the soil out. Okay. They'll filter the soil and collect all the poisons in their tissue, and that way remove that toxic substance from the soil, leaving the area healthier. Okay. Another great example is using a particular type of bacteria that consumes oil. So anytime we see a major oil spill, because we ship oil in boats, okay, and sometimes something happens that causes the boat to sink, or perhaps causes the oil derrick, that is the mining platform that's out in the sea, to have some damage and spill some oil, we get a layer of petroleum oil floating over the water. Okay, and that's a real problem because it blocks out the sunlight and it can get on all the native species that live in that area, whether they're fish or birds, and it's a huge, huge problem. So what we do is we take these bacteria and we throw them on the water where the oil is, and what they do is they consume all the oil and they break it down and then they release it as harmless gases. Okay, and then when there's no more oil, what happens to the bacteria? They die. Okay. So we actually do use bacteria to bioremediate oil spills. Okay. Again, that's a section you may want to check the textbook for. There's a lot more information in there. I want you to read that briefly. Our last restoration method is called bioaugmentation. Okay. And bioaugmentation means we use an organism that will add essential nutrients to depleted soil. So if we take something like a clover, like clovers would be like the 4-leaf clover that's supposed to be lucky. Usually they have 3 leaves, but if you find a 4-leaf one, it's supposed to be lucky. Okay. If we take those clovers and we plant them in a place where we know that the soil is low in nutrients, okay, where the soil is kind of barren, we know that the clover will actually replenish nitrogen levels in the soil. So it's a great species of plant to start with when we're trying to restore an ecosystem. Okay. So again, double check the textbook. I really want you to focus on doing the questions in this section because they're really, really going to help you. And by the way, this is the same PowerPoint that we would have been using in class. And so I would have given you the same advice, which is you need to check your textbook and make sure you read these in greater detail because there's some great communication style questions that we can get out of a topic like this. So make sure you do read the textbook. Make sure you do try those textbook questions and then check the solutions that will be posted with this lesson. And that is the last lesson of the biology unit. So next we're going to be moving on to electricity. I'm probably going to be filming those within the next couple of days, but they won't be posted until much, much later. Again, what are we worried about right now? Well, as of the time of this recording, you probably have an upcoming research project due, and you probably have an upcoming, let's call it a quest on LMS to complete. Again, I do not want you to stress. This is not going to be as difficult as doing it in class, okay? It is, and nothing is going to be marked as hard as it would be if we were in normal time, okay? So don't panic about that. Your primary concern should be staying healthy, staying safe. And until next time, take care, guys. Bye-bye.